What's up, fuckers? It's me again. You know, if I told you that a 2.5 hour long scathing critique of an award winning game would end up being less controversial than a much smaller review about an already contentious game, well, saying it out loud doesn't make it sound that outlandish now, does it? But yeah, I made a video review about Rivals of Aether 2, and the pushback against it has been fierce, to say the least. I can't say I didn't expect this. I knew there was going to be plenty of pushback against this, but I certainly didn't expect it to be this big and this, I guess annoying would be the word I'm looking for. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Because let me be perfectly clear, I don't have a problem with anyone giving heavy critiques of my own work. As a matter of fact, I think of it as an invaluable asset to making sure that I can actually improve my work. But a lot of what is being said in response just kind of, well, we'll just say it failed to change my mind, I suppose. That and these responses prove that I did do something wrong with that video. Like, it's pretty clear that one of the biggest issues with the video is that not only did I not elaborate on my points well enough, but I also very clearly lacked information that could have changed my viewpoint. Well, maybe it wouldn't have changed my conclusion about the game overall, but it would have changed something at least. So hopefully this addendum can make my position just a little more clearer. And of course the method I'll be going about that is responding to the responses to my own video. Just the way God intended, am I right? Quick disclaimer, I will not be making any effort to hide the names of anyone who commented on my video, not because I'm trying to send any hate their way, but because considering the size of my channel, there is quite literally just no point in hiding them. Like, it will not take long to find these. Same disclaimer still applies, though. Don't bully these people just because I mentioned them, okay? Cool. Alright, we'll just go right in now. First of all, I'd like to talk about this comment, which makes 3 different points, all of which I will talk about for a brief period. First point just kind of shows that people are willing to admit that the lack of content in Rivals 2 is a problem, so I'm at least glad we can agree on that. The second point is this idea that the special get-ups add more variety to the game, and the annoying thing about this defense is that it's kind of just pedantically correct. All you can really say in response to that defense is that you've already had plenty of options for these get-up scenarios. Like, especially on the ledge. You can neutral get up, you could roll, you could get up attack, you could jump, you could fall back down again. You've had options. Adding a second version of one of those options that's typically slower and with longer range, like, yeah, I guess that's more variety, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like it's a half-hearted addition, you know? That's the only thing I can really say about that point. On one hand, I see where you're coming from, but on the other hand, I can't help but feel like you're overestimating what these mechanics actually add to the game. Now, it's the third point, on the other hand, that I have a lot more to say about. First of all, the point that shields and grabs were added into the game to make it more accessible to a wider audience, well, it goes without saying that that is a hilarious thing to say in the comment section of a video where one of my main points was that the game developed an incredibly hostile environment towards casual players, and love it or hate it, but casual players are the majority of the player base in literally every game. Secondly, the idea that shields and grabs can be in the game while still having a unique identity compared to Smash, well, that's definitely true, but I don't really think that this game succeeded at that. Like, if you ask me what the identity of Rivals 1 is, I would definitely say that part of it is because it's different to Smash Brothers. So if you take that and just add on more Smash mechanics onto that, you could probably see why I would think it starts to lose that identity. Though, continuing on that subject, there was a lot of points being made that the identity of Rivals of Aether revolves around the uniqueness of the characters, which I won't deny is definitely the philosophy when it comes to their designing characters, but on the other hand, the more I think about that, the less sure I am if I actually like that direction or not. You know, when every character is designed to be complex and interesting, I can't help but feel like that we lose something in all of that. Like, we lose the opportunity to have a character that is interesting because they're simple, you know? Especially after I saw Galvin's gameplay trailer, it kind of feels like that a Rivals of Aether character is more or less defined by having at least one move that turns them into a walking stage hazard. Even comparatively more simple characters like Clarence still have the plasma field. But yeah, I don't think any of these points you made are particularly egregious or anything. All I can really do is just agree to disagree. Anyway, that comment was kind of just an appetizer. Now we get on to the much more meaty arguments. So the next few points are going to be about a general point I made in the video, the one I spend the absolute least time on, because... Okay, forgive me for assuming that I wouldn't have to elaborate so much on that point, but seriously, I did not expect people to be this defensive about the live service parts of this game. These points aren't going to be directed at any one particular comment, these are just going to be addressing the general criticisms I've been getting from these. First of all, I want to address the fact that the cosmetics are an optional thing. Again, this argument's annoying because of how it's pedantically correct, but alright, I'll humor that. Let's consider the fact that the costumes and all the cosmetics are optional. Alright, I don't have to engage with that in the slightest. Why the fuck am I playing this game then? You play the game, you get coins, you get battle pass and character level up rewards, you get cosmetics and currencies from them. That all ties back into the shop. I mean, yeah, you technically don't have to engage with them, but if you're not, what other reason do you have to play this game? Like, getting high scores on arcade mode and the extra modes? Like, be serious. Oh, and let's also not forget that you only get 4 alternate colors on each character right out the gate, so yeah, add that to the reasons why you would want to engage with the shop. To say that this is all optional, while technically correct, is very clearly missing the bigger picture. The next point I want to cover related to this is an important one because it is a very blatant mischaracterization of me. Some points have been made about how battle passes are free and how that's positive, and the fact that I left that out of the video means that I'm trying to create some kind of misleading narrative about the game. To that, all I can really say is that I sort of addressed this near the beginning of that video when I said, as much as I would like to give it credit for what it does right, this video will be focused on its biggest issues. Like, I feel like that quote alone kind of shows what the purpose of this video is supposed to be. And with that quote in mind, when I didn't mention that the battle passes were free, do you think the more reasonable assumption as to why I did that is because I knew about it, thought it could be used as a point against me, and then left it out of the video to create some kind of weird, malicious narrative about the game? Or is it because I knew about it, didn't have a problem with it, and then left it out the video because this video is explicitly not covering the parts of the game that I actually do like? 3 out of 10 is absolutely a low score, but at least with my metrics, I don't give that rating to games that I don't at least like in some regard. That is half a point higher than the rating I gave my actual least favorite game of all time. Like, surely there would be something I like about it, right? But yeah, part of the reason I didn't cover any of the positive points or even the smaller negative points like the menus is because I wanted the video to have a more focused structure. Whether or not I managed to achieve that successfully, I'll leave up for you to decide, but ultimately that is the reason why it's structured that way. Okay, now we get into 2 points that I apparently really needed to elaborate on. For whatever reason, a lot of people just missed what the problem was with these 2 points. First of all, the grinding. Now there were multiple different defenses in regards to the grinding, some of them make more sense than others. However, to truly understand just how much of a problem the grind in this game is, let's just crunch some numbers, yeah? So we're not going to be taking Aether bucks into account whatsoever. We're just going to be considering the grind it takes for coins. Obviously, it goes without saying that the very existence of Aether bucks can make this grind a lot shorter than it would be. However, you also have to keep in mind that Aether bucks are fundamentally a finite resource. Eventually, you will run out of them and you'll have to pay money to get more. So just using the metrics I displayed in that video as a point of reference, 8,731 Aether coins across 7 hours of playtime. That 7 hours is accounting for things that don't reward coins, like training modes and tutorials and extra modes. You get it. But we can be extra generous and say that that was over the course of 6.5 hours. So we just divide those two numbers and we get an average of roughly 1,343 coins per hour. So, once again, just using what I showed in the video as a point of reference, a common tier skin costs 50,000 Aether coins, and if we assume it follows the same pricing pattern as those avatars up there, then that would mean a rare tier skin costs 100,000 coins and an epic tier skin costs 200,000 coins. Now, if we calculate this, we'll find out to get a common tier skin off of coins alone, that is going to take you 37 hours. 37 hours for skins that are ultimately just pattern swaps. These skins have little to no actual changes to the character's geometry. Though moving on to the higher quality skins, a rare skin is no better because that'll take an average of 74.5 hours. That is just over 3 days straight. Of course, all that is just completely blown out of the water once we get to epic tier skins because that would take an average of 149 hours. To give you an idea of how egregious that is, I have 500 hours of playtime on Marvel Rivals. As far as money is concerned, I have spent around the same amount as I have spent on the base price for Rivals 2, and not only have I obtained plenty of good skins from the battle passes and other sources, but I also have more than enough currency to buy the first legendary skin for the thing whenever that rolls out. Like, I don't know what else to say. Rivals of Aether 2 is just asking me to give up way too much of my time for way too little. Again, these calculations are not taking Aetherbucks into account, and obviously that will speed things up, but again, it doesn't matter if you get every single one you can obtain for free, eventually you will have to start paying for them. Speaking of Aetherbucks, how about we talk about the pricing? Because even though I thought the problem with this was just blatantly obvious, some people just apparently missed the point. Luckily, the math needed to prove my point is much more simple compared to the grinding. Now we're going to be focusing on skins again because, well, yeah, let's be honest, that is the main thing people are going to want from the store. They wouldn't be the most expensive item in the catalog unless that wasn't the case. Alright, so an epic tier skin, the most expensive and presumably the most high quality compared to the others. 1,500 Aetherbucks. We go to the purchasing options, the closest option for that is 1,000 Aetherbucks for $12.96. Needless to say, that's not enough. So if you're going to be paying for an epic tier skin, you're being forced to pay more than you should. The absolute minimum amount of money you have to pay just to get one of these skins is $38.91 for 3,150 Aetherbucks. Again, not only is that nearly the same price as the actual base game, but the game is forcing you to pay double than what you should theoretically need to pay, just completely arbitrarily. This is what I mean when I describe this monetization as predatory. These are the exact same tactics that you see being used in other games with similar models. Capcom pulled off the same shit when they released their first batch of Street Fighter 6 costumes. I despised it when it happened then, and I still despise it here. Though, one other thing I would like to address about this particular point is that someone tried making the comparison to Helldivers 2, because that's a lot of grinding for skins as well, which is the most apples to oranges comparison you possibly could have made here. For one thing, Helldivers 2 has this fancy little thing called non-linear progression. You're not just playing the game to unlock new skins. You're playing to unlock new stratagems, items from the war bonds, so on and so on and so on. Super credits are absolutely a rare resource when you're trying to grind for them, but not only are they not finite in nature, but you also have multiple ways of going about grinding for them. And even if you want to immediately skip all of that nonsense and just cough up money for, say, a premium war bond, well, you need 1,000 super credits to unlock those, and lo and behold, if you go to the purchasing options, you can spend $13.49 on exactly the amount you need. This doesn't account for things like the Halo Warbond, because that is a more expensive one than the others, but that is very clearly the exception and not the rule. So, $38.91 for 2 of the supposed highest quality skins in Rivals 2, or $13.49 on a Helldivers 2 Warbond that gives you armor, decals, and a whole bunch of other things. Which way, Western man? So hopefully now you understand where I'm coming from when I criticize this part of the game. When I describe all of this as predatory, I don't mean that simply because it exists, I mean that because of the incredibly unreasonable grinding needed to get anything for free, and the obfuscation of pricing through its in-game currencies. Just doing the math shows that if you want to get any singular skin in this game, it's either a waste of time or a waste of money. These are certainly not what I would call ethical practices, and they most certainly are not forgivable or not scummy just because the characters are being released for free. Oh, and to elaborate on that point, yes, I actually legitimately would prefer if DLC characters were paid over this. I know full well that that also has its drawbacks, but if the alternative is going through this bullshit, then yeah, I would prefer it. And if you want to say that's not a good thing to do because characters would be locked out of training modes or replays or whatever, you can literally just not design the game that way. Oh yeah, people have also been pointing out something in the comments, something that I actually knew about on some level but just forgot about. And it's that the whole storefront was results of community feedback on wanting to have some kind of way to financially support the developers. But if this is what resulted from that, then all I can say is, why? Like, this is the equivalent of a YouTuber who's not making enough money off his videos, so he takes up a gambling sponsorship instead of setting up, I don't know, merch store, channel memberships, or a Patreon page. In fact, at that point, why not just make a Patreon page for Aether Studios? If people are willing to spend money on this kind of stuff, then they definitely are willing to spend money on that, and it is most certainly more preferable. Hell, Studio Trigger set up a Patreon page a couple years back, and they're certainly not worse off for it. Yeah, there are just too many problems with the shop and microtransactions in this game. I genuinely just don't see what's defendable about it. Oh, and by the way, anyone comparing the price points of the microtransactions of this game to the price points of the DLC in Smash Ultimate, I kinda feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot there. Like, just consider the fact that an individual Fighter's Pass is very much cheaper than the minimum amount required for an epic tier skin in Rivals 2, and for that price you get 5 or 6 entire characters and everything else that's bundled with them, like music and stages. And I would also additionally like to point out that individual Mii costumes that are DLC are sold for 99 cents each. Anyway, moving on from all that, now we get to what I have happily referred to in my notes as the dense comment. I call it that not only because it's just one massive paragraph, but also because it has the most unique arguments made out of every other comment that I've seen. Okay, first of all, the idea that the special pummel grab brake system is there to have a grab brake. Now, if we're comparing this to how grab brakes work in Smash Bros., I would actually argue that that version actually has a surprising amount of depth to it, and let me explain. Because even though to break out of a grab, all you have to do is mash, that actually creates a bit of a mind game with you and the attacker. Sure, it is one-sided, but the attacker has to consider whether or not they want to risk you breaking out of the grab for some free damage, or if they just want to throw you right away and keep the offense going. In a very small way, it is its own form of a skill expression. Like, if you're really, really good at reacting and mashing, you could probably break out of a grab before they get a second pummel in, and I usually do 2 pummels just to be safe. I've said it before and I'll say it again, mechanical depth is not the same as mechanical density. Even something as theoretically mindless as this, it still has something to it. Meanwhile, you have the grab brake system in Rivals 2, and it simplifies all that into a literal 50-50. Call it complex and interesting because of how it ties into the new specials, but I just don't see how that's true. Also, furthermore, when you compare this to grab brakes in other fighting games, that kind of makes me wonder if you play those games? Because grab brakes in platform fighters as we see them here, and grab brakes in traditional fighting games, or throw techs as they're more commonly known as, these are 2 entirely different things. To do a throw tech in a traditional fighting game, you have to actually predict that a throw is coming and then use your own throw to put distance between you two. Most of the time when you get grabbed, you're going to get thrown and you gotta deal with it. Obviously, I'm not including fighting games that have other forms of throw breaks, but even in other traditional fighting games like Grand Blue Versus, for example, that has a way for you to actually react to a throw and break out of it, not only does doing it that way actually make you take damage from it, but there are certain scenarios where you actually can't do that, like if you get punished, for example. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. I've only played the free version of Grand Blue Versus, and it hasn't been for very long. Alright, next, the idea that parries are actually still useful. I will happily admit that this is the result of bad wording on my part. I definitely should not have made that implication, but even then, the conclusion of that section wasn't that they were entirely useless, it was just that they were significantly more situational than they were before. And you know, that's kind of just the nature of it when it has to compete against another defensive mechanic that carries with it much lower risk. Okay, onto the justification for floor hugging. This is more or less the same logic that I argued against in that video, so I'll just elaborate on the point I made in that video. Instant death or touch of death combos in traditional fighters can happen all the time, so damage or hit stun scaling or some other type of combo limit system is usually put in place to prevent that. To prove just how effective damage scaling alone is, well, using Soul Bad Guy and Strive as an example, a multi-hit 5k, yes, I'm using numpad notations, and no, you can't stop me, a multi-hit 5k, a 2k, a close S, a 5H, 2 clean hit Fafnirs, a clean hit Heavy Volcanic Viper, a Tyrant Rave, and a Wall Break all collectively deal 563 damage in total. That is more than enough to kill you instantly, but as you can see from this footage, when I actually do all of those moves in the same combo, it only deals 284, which is still a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but then again, this is Strive and this is Soul Bad Guy. It'd be more surprising if it was a low number. Is implementing this outright going to inherently fix the idea of getting infinitely comboed? No. Is this something that would naturally fit inside of a platform fighter? Probably not. But is that design challenge something for the developers to overcome and something that they can answer without having to implement floor hugging as a band-aid fix? Absolutely. If you're trying to fix this issue, maybe don't implement a feature that would encourage people to be overly campy and just kind of like bait out attacks so they can punish you because that's just how the game works. If the combo problem is something that has to be solved, there are many more solutions you could do. And then on the point about me making unfair comparisons between Rivals 1 and 2, well, first of all, I would like to mention that I do have an awareness of how much content was in Rivals 1 on launch. I actually know that there was only 6 characters. But even with that in mind, I am still comparing the current version of both these games for the most part. And even when I'm talking about the state of Rivals 2 on launch, like when it comes to the lack of tutorials or whatnot, it's still worth noting that Rivals 2 has not received a major content update since before the launch of Rivals 2. It has more or less remained the same game for the entire life cycle of Rivals 2. And honestly, I don't think making comparisons between the amount of content in both these games at present is really an unfair comparison when they're both being sold for the same price and one of them has a lot more to offer. Oh, and that same game also doesn't have any of the scummy microtransaction bullshit, so, I think it's safe to say that I prefer one of those over the other. Moving on to the last point made in this comment, I think this brings us to the more general allegation of skill issue, which all I can really say is, yeah, I did admit it. I am not good at this game or games like it. I know that alone probably isn't very convincing of anything, and it's honestly barely an argument in the first place, so let me see if I can make you look at this particular point from a different angle instead. Like I said in that same video, I consider fighting games, that being traditional ones like Street Fighter, to be the most fun video game genre to get better at. It's evident that it happened with Guilty Gear because I used that a lot in my video. This evidently happened in Street Fighter 6 because I managed to peak at Diamond 3 in ranked mode. And as a smaller example, I even got Fightcade for the sole purpose of trying out Mark of the Wolves, and in the 30 minutes to an hour I spent bending my thumbs backwards trying to do these weird buffers and links just to pull off one combo, I had so much more fun just doing that than my entire playtime of Rivals 2, and that would include the very brief honeymoon phase. To put it another way, I only seriously gotten into fighting games because of Street Fighter 6. Meanwhile, I've been casually enjoying Smash Bros. Ever since I was a kid playing Brawl. If platform fighters truly had that same level of fun to get better at, then I'd like to think I would have found it by now, but I just haven't. And at this point, I doubt I ever will. Maybe this is just an extremely simple case of being good at one thing and not being good at another. But regardless, anytime I try to learn about how to get better at platform fighters, I just end up learning things and all I can think is, okay, what's supposed to be fun about this? When I learn about mechanics like floor hugging or DI or whatever else, I don't intrinsically see mechanics that are useful for making it easier to win or to make the game more fun to play. I just see physics quirks that people exploit in order to make the game harder to lose. Yes, there is a difference. Again, I can make an entire video about my problems with platform fighters like this, but that is definitely a down-the-line sort of video. At the very least, it's going to have to wait until I try out a few quick matches, and if development is still going smoothly, I'll also wait for the release of Byte Breakers. And that about covers it for all the points that I quite literally took note of. I think my main takeaway from all of this is that there was a lot of information regarding Rivals 2 and its development that I seem to have taken for granted, and it probably would have been important to know about. Shout out to the one guy who was the first to point out the studio actually nearly went bankrupt before the game released. It's comments like this that I genuinely do appreciate. Let it be known that if you want to change someone's mind on anything, one of the best things you can do is to present them with new information that they may not have otherwise. Of course, does all the information that I got from these comments really change my perspective on Rivals 2 as a whole? Not really. Especially that point about the bankruptcy, does that change my assumption that this game had a directionless development? Nope. If anything, it reinforces it. I can't help but think that if the game actually had a coherent direction during development, it probably would have been harder to go bankrupt. But I'm not a business major or anything. I'm not claiming to be an expert about this stuff. All I can really do is just go off of my intuition and educated guesses. And while the near bankruptcy can certainly be used to explain why Rivals 2 launched in the state it was in, I definitely don't think it should be used as an excuse for that. Because if you really just stop and think about it for a second, when that sort of thing happens to a studio during the development of a game, who do you think is the most likely to be responsible for that happening? I'm not saying there weren't outside factors that could have affected this, but surely the blame for the bankruptcy would lie in the studio itself, no? Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert in this, I'm just throwing ideas around. So, I guess in summary, if Rivals 2 truly is the best game of its kind like many people say, then, well, either I'm in a mental asylum right now, or everyone else just has really low standards, cause, I'm still not seeing it. If you are having fun with this game, I don't have a problem with that, but I just don't see what's fun about it. Giving out hot takes like the ones I've done on this channel can be a bit nerve-wracking at times, and I've definitely felt that, especially in cases like this where I know the potential backlash is going to be intense. But anytime I beat myself over what other people are going to think about these videos, I repeat a simple motto I gave myself specifically for situations like this. It goes something like, I'd rather people hate me for being honest than lie because I'm afraid of them. So if I'm forced to choose just one singular thing for you to take away from that review and this addendum, it's that when I say Rivals of Aether 2 is a bad game, the reason I say that is because I genuinely believe it to be true. Did I choose the best arguments in favor of that? Probably not. Could I have argued my points better? Sure. But that doesn't change the fact that that is the conclusion I have reached. You can call me misguided or misinformed, but at the end of the day, I am not lying about what I believe. Anyway, that about does it. This was just a low effort video I could put out to sort of clarify my position on this game and respond to some of the more egregious things said against me. I tried to cover everything I could, but if there is anything I missed or you have any further points or questions you want to make, leave them down in the comments. I may or may not respond depending on how friendly you are and how willing I am to actually read comments. Because if I can just level with you, this subject matter has taken up way too much space in my mind as of late, and I am desperate to move on to something else. So, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go work on a video about a game that's actually good. I don't really have a good way of ending this video either, so